Hi everyone. Just give me one quick second. I'm going to post this out. Today I'm here with Deandra again, and we will be covering coloring the face. And this is a live stream that is basically going to be mostly about color and how to choose different skin tones and how to work from a simple sketch first, and then put your colors either below it first and then kind of cover the lines after, or just directly color on top. So let me go ahead and push this to all of our social media, and then we will get started. And as always, I will have the comments pulled up on the side so that Deandra will be constantly looking through the comments and then sending them my way, and then I will answer them the best to my ability. And that doesn't even have to be related to the topic at hand. It could even be about something just related to concept art or digital art in general, Photoshop questions, anything it might be. So don't feel shy to ask. Okay. And we are set. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Tim Von Rieden from Concept Cookie, and with me is Deandra Pop. Say hi.
Hello.
And today we will be covering coloring the face. And we do these live streams every Wednesday at 2 p.m., and that's Central Time in the States. And outside of the US, it is -5 GMT. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just get started. So here is the PSD that I'm going to be working on. The right is just a quick little sketch I did just to create a marketing advertisement for what I'm going to basically be covering in this live stream. But I'm going to go ahead and hide that. And pretty much I'm going to be focusing on this little sketch I did a while back, and it's a simple kind of example of how you can take a sketch you do and add color to it. And the sketch was done without any opacity, so the line art itself is a solid line. And that'll help in the long run, and I'll show you why. But starting off, I also want to make it known that I do have reference pulled up on other PSDs. And I think it's important for you guys to not look at reference so much as cheating, and I'm going to be reiterating this more and more, especially throughout these live streams, because I find references to be so extremely helpful to furthering your skills that you should never just disregard it or just blow it off as cheating, or you're not doing it the accurate way. And a lot of the times I color pick from either photos I've taken or from photos of celebrities, anything where I can grab colors that are as true to life as I can possibly make it. I'm going to make this as big as I can so you guys can see it better. Let me see on the live stream here. Okay, that looks about right. Okay, so pretty much I have the sketch itself on its own layer, and it's on a multiply. If I put it on normal, since I did it on a white background and I did it all in one layer, you're still going to get that white background, but if you change the layer mode to multiply, it almost looks as if the white becomes transparent, and then you can color over, under, or over it. So what I'm going to be doing, and the colors that I selected here, those I just color picked from previous images I've done, or they're in my swatch kit, but I wanted you guys to actually be able to see them, because I think having it be visible gives you kind of an idea of the color range I'm going for. You can even see with the skin tones I've selected, they're more warm. They usually have more of a pink or red hue to them, and I think that's more of a personal preference, and that's something you'll find out more about yourself as you create your own characters, if you're a character artist, that is. Because if you're doing more environments, you won't be worrying about skin tones as much. You'll probably be worrying about like foliage colors. But what I'm going to be doing first is I'm going to create a new layer underneath of that sketch layer. And what that'll allow me to do is I'll be able to color underneath that sketch. And you can see why this would be so important. But when I usually start off, I like to work with a darker color as my base. I'm just going to slop it on. And the brush that I'm going to be using for most of the live stream is this chalk brush. And you can download this. I think it's even in the basic Photoshop pack, but if you want, it's also on the Concept Cookie site. It's under our free brushes. And this is the one I tend to use a lot, especially if I want more of a traditional hand-drawn feel. And I think I'm going to be making a new layer for each of these just so you guys can see the different steps that I take and the progress that we'll make along this live stream. So initially, when I see something like this, the first thought that comes to my head, and the first thought that should always come to your head, is where's the light source coming from? Is there a light source, or are we doing it more fantastical lit? Kind of decide on what you're going to be doing with your light source, because you want to keep it consistent throughout the entire piece. So for me, I'm going to keep it pretty much a fantastical lit where it's almost pillow shaded. So I'm not going to be having like a harsh direct light from the side, and you're going to be getting like these harsh angles that the nose would then be producing, and then there'd be a lot of cast shadows. I'm not going to be worrying so much about that. Rather, I'm going to be focusing on doing like a light shading where the shadows are very minimal, and if anything, I'm going to be adding more blue tones and more colors to soften the shadows so they're not as harsh. And this is just a technique that I use when I'm trying to just show off the character rather than show off the lighting or the environment around the character. And the way that I'm going to be doing this is the color I laid out first, by the way, is I'm going to be laying down the color, using my color picker tool, picking up that color, and then blending it in. And this is a process that I rinse and repeat throughout most of my entire pieces. So once you kind of find your pattern that you kind of get into, you'll find yourself repeating things, because then it's not so much work, it's just it's very relaxing almost, because you can go on autopilot. You're not thinking as much, and it's more of an enjoyment at this point. So what am I looking for? I'm pretty much trying to add some initial value to the face. So right away, I know a lot of people like to color the forehead all the way, but I would recommend stick toward your lights more on the eyebrow parts. And I'll get more into this later as I add the lighter hues and tones. But the area just above the eyebrows, I usually like to have lighter than the rest of the forehead, and then I usually like to have a bump sort of in the middle of the forehead, and then I'll light it up here as well. And that just adds a little more realism, especially if you're trying to add some age to your character. If I had it all smooth and it didn't really have any wrinkle or any kind of age to it, it would young him quite a bit. But I'm trying to create something that looks mid-20s-ish, or even young 20s, and I'm trying not to go for the teens as much. So usually I like to lay it out on specific areas. And you know what? I'm going to create a new layer to kind of show you guys. This area, the tip of the nose, the cheeks, usually just a little bit on the lip, and then the chin. These I would consider the main lit areas. Those are the areas I probably focus on the most, and then maybe even a line just above the lip. And these are the areas that I tend to focus on laying the new lighter hues on the strongest, and then blend it outward from these initial points. So I'll hide that layer, and I'll kind of show you guys what I mean as I continue doing this. And when I'm going to each different section of the face, I'm thinking about the different techniques that I know about how to color the different facial features. So like when I get toward the lips, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have a little light indentation just below the corner pockets of the mouth, a little shine on the lip, maybe a little on top. But for the most part, I'm going to keep that upper lip darker. But I'm going to pull down this light color just to the top of that lip. And I'm constantly thinking about, okay, as I move on to like the nose, okay, what are the tips and tricks I know on how to do the nose? And then I'll lay those kind of out. So the more that you do characters, the more comfortable you will be with, okay, how do I do this part of the face? And then your mind will go find the area in your mind that knows how to do it, and it'll just kind of come out through your muscle memory.
So, Tim, you got your first question. Somebody wants to start drawing characters, but they can't really get the shape right. How do they fix that?
I'm assuming the shape of the head or the body?
Yeah, I would say probably the head, since that's the focus of your stream today.
Then I would definitely say practice, look at references, look at artist studies that they do of faces, and then look at anything that gives you little tips. Like one that I like to share out is the eyes should be roughly about the center of the face. And that's something that you kind of can eye out, but the more that you practice doing it, the more that you'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then other things will start to appear to you. And these little tips and tricks are the things that will make your drawings more consistent. So like the nose from the top to the base is usually the size of the ear. So you can see that this ear is probably a little smaller than it should be, and I could make that a little bigger. And even this ear on this side should probably be lifted just a tad. And it obviously depends on the angle and the direction the face is looking in. But for the most part, these are just general guidelines that you can follow. And then another one that you could do is usually the corner pockets of the mouth should fall right below the pupil if it's a straight face-on face. And literally all these little tips and tricks, just look for them, even across the internet, even Google. And the more that you kind of pick up, and make sure you're picking up the right ones, because there's definitely tips and tricks out there that actually aren't accurate. So you want to be a little leery of that. But for the most part, the more tips and tricks that you keep stored in your mind, the better. So just look them up and don't feel like using reference is cheating. I wouldn't recommend bringing an image into Photoshop and just drawing right over it. I would recommend bringing an image into Photoshop and then doing a side-by-side drawing. So it's a lot of observing, and then you're analyzing the picture more, and you're learning that way. So I would say that would be a good way to learn. And DeAndre, you have any tips?
Um, yeah, I would just say the same. Like, if you don't know the proportions, all you have to do is like do studies and like look at reference, and you'll eventually pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's just like that initial like if you lack the knowledge, just go out and like get it. There's like plenty of pictures on the internet or like even just observing from life. Just really paying attention to like placement of features, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to hide that layer. So you can see what that initial color did, and already we're starting to get some value. It's a very subtle value shift, but then we're going to go ahead and put on another color that's lighter in the value and slightly in the hue as well. So I think I'm going to choose this color. Oops, I'm going to do it on a new layer too. So if we can remember those initial areas where I said earlier that I'm going to start out and kind of pillow shade outward, I'm going to do the same thing with this color, just I'm not going to pull it out as much. So I'm going to go ahead and start coloring on those areas.
Our next question/comment is, my line work is acceptably good, but I'm really bad with colors. Any tips? I do cell shading because it's easier.
Oh, so she's saying she's not comfortable using color?
Yeah.
Oh man, that sounds like a fourth of my art friends. Uh, what's funny is I actually find color to be the best part about digital art, but other people find it to be the most stressful or it's very yeah, I guess stressful is the best word for it, and they would rather stick to just line art. Now, if you feel your line art is super strong, don't feel like you have to be compelled to add color. There's one of my friends that I almost wish he wouldn't add any color because his line work is so strong. But if you're really determined on getting better with color, I would recommend obviously practicing. Do once a day. Don't try to overkill yourself. Don't try to create final, beautiful compositions. Limit yourself to something simple. Like do a study of like an octopus tentacle, and you'll be surprised with how much you can pick up and learn. Because then you're not so much focused on making it look perfect as so much you're trying to make the colors accurate. And I think once you do that enough times with a bunch of different studies, then eventually you'll be at the point where doing something like a skin or eyes or anything that might seem challenging now will become so much more easier in the long run. I usually try to lighten the cheeks more than the other areas, and sometimes even the nose, just so I can add and bring the eye's focus more towards the middle center of the face. And I think it's because eyes are the big thing for me, and I try to draw as much attention or any visual cues and tricks that I can to bring the eye towards the actual eyes in the picture. So by lightening up the area here, we're going to have that nice contrast between the dark socketed eyes and the lightened cheeks. But actually, as I say that, that doesn't mean that the area that is under the eye, so the eye socket itself, a lot of people think, well, it's in shadow. But a lot of the times, and that was something I would be caught in. I would be caught in that a lot. But I would say add just a little bit of value under there as well. Because sometimes if it is there's no lighter values, the eye sockets themselves become very deep, and that might not be the exact look that you're looking to create. Then for the nose, I usually like to bring the lighter color and bump it kind of right against the actual nostril where the nostril meets, or not the nostril, the skin that kind of surrounds the nostril and where that meets the cheeks. And that just gives it that nice contrast. And it'll become definitely more apparent when I hide the line art layer on the look that that'll give.
Somebody says, Ethan asks, I'm just now getting into drawing digitally, but I don't have experience with traditional drawing. Is it better if I scan in physical line work or try to do everything digitally? I don't want to make bad habits.
This is something that I'm asked a lot, and my answer kind of changed over the years, where before I would say, do your best to learn all digital. But now that I've kind of seen and talked with more artists, especially with talking with these bigger artists that are going to be doing tutorials for us, I think I realize more that if the quality will become is stronger if you start on paper, you start traditionally, then why not go and take the extra time to do it? If you have the time to do it, you can work traditionally and scan it in. But if you're trying to be more time conscious, I would say starting digitally would be more efficient. But that's kind of up to you and your situation. And I know even with me, I feel stronger drawing with line art on paper, where digitally it just does not turn out for me. I feel very pressured, and I feel my lines are very mm, not smooth. They're very jagged, and I don't like the look of it. And oftentimes people think digital art is easier to do line art and stuff, but oftentimes I think doing traditional is still the way to go for that kind of stuff. So I guess kind of weigh your options, and I would actually recommend keep doing what you're doing because if it's working, eventually you'll be able to make a transition where your speed from the traditional to the digital will be faster as well.
I think it's wise to just like experiment on your own too, because sometimes some things work for some people and they don't work for others.
Hmm.
There isn't like one right way to do it. It's just how like you feel about it. Even like your technique with like coloring, like some people work from grayscale and then like they color over, some people just start with color, like
Oh
whatever works
yeah.
for us.
Okay, now I'm adding this even lighter hue, and now I'm going to be really conscious of how I'm laying it on, because this will definitely direct a lot of the attention, since it is the lightest value in the entire piece, and there will definitely be a contrast the more that I add. Because let's say I went really heavy like on the nose, obviously the eye is being directed right to that point of the nose. So I want to be a little conscious of how much I'm adding to these different areas. But I'm still trying to think of the different forms. So like even when I'm doing the nose, I'm looking at this bridge of the nose and I'm thinking, okay, well how inset is it? Is it longer? How far away is the nose pushed out from the face? And I'm trying to color it so it mimics the exact nose that I'm seeing in my head.
So, okay, somebody says, I think it was similar to one we had from the last stream, but we didn't have enough time to answer. How do you get better at imagining things? A vivid imagination?
Oh,
For
yeah,
example, when I imagine something, I get a very faint image that feels like it's fading away.
yes, absolutely. And I remember because we saw this question after the stream ended, and I wish we would have answered it, but I'm glad someone re-asked it. Uh, there was a great tutorial I watched from Feng Zhu, and I think it answered and summed it up quite perfectly. It's having, oh, what did he call it?
Visual library.
Visual library, thank you. And it's something that you collect over the years, and that's where your inspiration and your creativity, if you want to call it that, kind of comes from. So the more visuals and the more that you're filling your mind, I always think of it as like you're feeding your imagination. And the more that you give it, the better outcomes and outputs you can create because you had more to work with. But if you grew up and you didn't really get into video games or you didn't really have any attachment to the art world at all, and then you try to start it at like 22 years old, you're definitely going to be at a disadvantage from someone that's been, playing video games or watching movies really religiously since they were small, because they have so much more visual cues and uh, inspirations and visuals to pull from, and they might not have the skill yet, but you can teach the skill. You can't so much teach the visual library. And I almost want to link, you know what, I'll link that tutorial after this live stream on our Facebook page. And it's a great one to watch. It's actually one of the few that I really think everyone should watch. It's one of those tutorials where I think any artist at any age can relate to it. So I will definitely link that out. And then Deandra, do you have anything to say about that?
No, basically the same thing.
Okay.
It's, just building it up over time, constantly looking at like your surroundings, observing. That's it. That stuff.
hmm
You just have to be patient. Like it takes a long time to like build up like a huge like reference list in your mind. So like
Yeah.
until then it's okay to like rely on references
hmm
inspired from that.
And really quickly, just for the eyes, I'm using this color as my base. And I know you guys can't see my color picker, but it is pretty far from white. And I think that's something that artists need to get away from, especially younger, newer artists. They feel that something that's closer to white, something like this, would work better. But actually, the less or the farther away you stay from white, oftentimes creates a better result. And then your shine, which is more of that white that you might be intending to lean toward, when you add that just slight reflection shine, you can see how much more of a contrast that is between this lighter, almost white color and the eye color itself. And for the eye color itself, just look in the mirror next time and really look at what color the eye, what is the cornea is, because it's definitely not a pure white. It definitely has some color to it. And then the green, I'm just working in green eyes, and you can work in any color you want. Usually brown can be a little tougher to work with, because if you don't add just a subtle variation, they oftentimes can look black. And that's not to say that some people don't have pure black eyes, but if you want to add just a little something to distinguish the iris and the pupil, what I would do is, if you're going to lay down that dark brown first, just add a very subtle, softer brown underneath of it. And it doesn't even have to be very heavy. It can be very light. But if you just add that little bit, it'll make all the difference. Let me hide that line art layer. So you can see when we hide the line art layer,
Ooh.
we kind of have the values in place, but we don't have any structure to it. So after I lay down just a few more touches here and there, then we'll edge off the background, and then we'll be able to see what we're trying to create a lot more clearly.
Will you be keeping your line art?
Kind of. I'll be drawing over it.
Okay.
And right now I'm using this really intense light color. I don't even know if you can see it on the live stream, but it actually has a little yellow tint to it. And with almost all my lighting and shadow variations, I try to either pull from warm or cool colors. So in this case, I'm going to be having my light sources be more warm. And then as I draw my shadows later, you'll see how I'm going to be pulling more from the cools.
Do you use like any Photoshop add-ons, like a color wheel or anything? Do you have any experience with that, Tim?
For the longest time, I wanted a color wheel, and then I was I tried the free trial and I loved it, and then the trial went away and I haven't re-downloaded it. But yeah, I would say the color wheel was something that was really awesome. But besides that, no, I don't really have any add-ons that I use at least. All right, let's go ahead and take it to the next step because right now I think I'm at the point where it's just kind of fiddling. I'm not really getting much done. So on a new layer, I'm going to grab that background color and, oh, you know what? I'm going to do this over that initial line art color because this is the point where I like to color over the initial line art layer. So I'm going to be pulling, oh, you know what? Before I do this, actually, this is where I like to add in my color variations because skin itself is not just one color with a gradient going toward the shadows and ghouls. I like to pull different colors and mix them into my face. So for the center area, you know what? Maybe I'll do this on an overlay layer. And anytime I add a multiplier overlay layer, I'll always lower the opacity afterwards. So I lay it down pretty thick at first, and then I'll edit it from there. So and that looks really intense right now, so I'll have to definitely lower that. So the middle region of the face, and this is something I learned from James Gurney, is there's different color regions of the face, typically. And especially in men, it's definitely more apparent. The middle of the face has a red hue to it. The top of the face or the forehead has a blue, or it has a yellow tint, and then the bottom half, or the bearded section, has somewhat of a blue. So usually I like to add in just a tad of that color variation, and he'll look like a clown until I lower this opacity. So let me add the yellow on the forehead. So you can definitely clearly see the three areas that I'm adding here. And then I'll lower the opacity quite a bit. So this is at about 40%. And you can see with that layer on and off, just the difference it makes. I might even turn it a little lower. And then from here, that's when I'll probably add in then my more harsh color tones add-ons, especially with my warmer colors. And this is where I'm getting definitely into more personal preference rather than just analyzing real life. Where I like to have the nose area, the area under the eye, and just some other slight variations of the face just be a tad more red, have more of that warm hue pulled in throughout.
Do you think it's possible to become a concept artist if you only do line work?
Yeah, absolutely.
What if
Especially if you see, this is a good example, the Dead Space Art of book. Most of the sketches of Isaac's suit are just pure line work, and even the spaceship. And those are so fantastic that adding color to it would have actually hurt the concept, I think, in general. And I forget who that concept artist is, but I can tell you he is really strong with his line art, and he is definitely a good example of someone that doesn't need to color to create and be a concept artist.
have you ever done like or experimented with like tattoo design or characters with
You know what's
tattoos?
funny is I always wanted to do at least one kind of a test. I watched a TV show, I think it's called Master Inc. Oh God, I don't know. It's with what's his name, Dave. Anyways, before I embarrass myself, it was a show where they did like test tattoos, and they would do it on like they would go to a meat factory and just practice tattoos on, which is kind of sick, on like animals that are about to be butchered. But I always thought it was such an intense process because you only get one shot at it. Like you can't redo it. I mean, you can cover it up and you can kind of edit it, but for the most part, you have to be very confident in what you're drawing and the way that you're adding it onto the person's skin. So even though I think it would be a really interesting field to at least test out maybe once or twice, I would never do it just because of the pressure. I think would be too much for me, where I really like to take my time with it, and I obviously am very comfortable with digital art, so I'm doing Command Z a lot, and I think you can't really do that with tattoo stuff.
Well, I think there's. What about like just designing tattoos and not actually?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. So I have designed a tattoo for someone that actually has it on their arm, and it was a little creature monster thing. But I find to be a lot more rewarding because that way someone else is kind of doing the the part that I'm not too comfortable doing, but you still get to design it and draw something pretty awesome. But you have to be very leery about the colors you're using because a lot of digital art colors aren't available for traditional artists, especially in the tattoo field. Like they can still mix colors, but sometimes it's really hard to create colors that are super vivid or vibrant. So I would keep the palette tone more muted. I mean, not you don't have to get crazy muted, but just be leery of like using ultra neon green or pink.
Do you have any suggestions for getting into the industry if someone doesn't live in like California, for example? This guy, Ryan Saunders, lives in South Africa.
I know Ryan, I've heard that name before. Um, it's going to be a little tough, admittedly, especially if you want to be a concept artist. More companies, although I am seeing more companies nowadays, are seeing the benefits of remote work. But if you want to work for like a big AAA company, for the most part, they're not going to be doing so much freelance work because a lot of their team members are in-house. But if you are good enough, I always say you don't have to worry. So as long as you keep
Mm,
practicing and keep pushing your skills, people will reach out to you, and then you won't be so much. Actually, you'll probably find out that you won't want to be working at a game studio or an animation studio, or maybe something like freelance is your calling and you just never knew it, or maybe even another career path that still involves digital art, but it's not so much for big name companies.
I think if you are good, like, and you do post your stuff like online somewhere, like someone will find you. Um,
Mhm.
as long as you like make sure like you're out there and available.
Hi, I gotta stop piddling with this. I'm gonna now edge out the background. So I'm gonna grab that background color. Mind you, you could also just use, maybe I'll just do that so it's easier for you guys to understand. A lot of times I like to paint over things and I like to collapse layers into one and just work on it like a painting. But if you want to be working for a company, oftentimes you'll be having to hide layers or add different layers. So what I'm doing is I'm going to that initial base color layer that we threw down and I'm using my eraser tool and just edging it out. Where normally I would probably grab my brush tool, make a new layer on top of everything, and edge it out that way. And that's because then I can work with the new strokes that I'm pushing on top of the line work rather than having to have the line art still dominate the image.
Was the tattoo design for Jonathan? Somebody asked.
No, actually that'd be really awesome. But it is someone that works at CG Cookie. His name's Matthew. And him and his wife got a tattoo of their little daughter, who they called their little monster. So that was the tattoo I did. Okay, so now that we're at this point, let's go ahead and add some of the extra stuff. So like the hair, rather than it being this weird blue, just being left over from the line art. So I'm just gonna lightly push this brown color. And I should be flipping my image. I should be doing this actually more than I have been this live stream.
Ethan also asks, who is your co-host?
This is Deandra Pop. She has been the one that has been doing our book reviews on the site and has, well, actually, I mean, Deandra, would you want to kind of introduce who you are and what you are currently pursuing?
I don't know.
Well,
I'm
Deandra is also a good example of someone that doesn't go the conventional route of going to an art school. And could you talk about that maybe and why you decided to learn more online?
um yeah, so I tried out going to like traditional like art school, but it was I found like that it was really what I was looking for, like, and so I decided to take like online classes from like CGMA, and there's tons of like other online schools that are like more geared towards concept art, which is what I want to do, rather than like putting stuff in a gallery. I think was like the big thing. So that's what I'm doing now. And while I'm doing that, I'm kind of working part time for CG Cookie. So I'm just doing like a few tasks here and there, just like helping out. I do the book reviews and I helped him with the streams just to like keep it on track. And I complete like exercises as like examples. Um, but yeah, so kind of new-ish here, but
hmm
we'll see where it goes. Um, do you listen to music when you're drawing? If so, can I ask what?
Yeah, I'm sure all my friends. Uh, well, actually, my friends hate it because I do listen to music almost all the entire time I draw, and a lot of the times I will put on a single song and I'll put it on repeat for the entire day. And I think I don't know why it is. My older sister's like that too, but we're able to do kind of zone out, and especially if it has like a repetitive pattern to the song. But I would say I listen to either orchestrated music or music that's more melodramatic, usually music that's not so amped up. And obviously, if you know who I am, I'm a huge lover of Lana Del Rey. So I listen to a lot of her during my workday. And oftentimes, I usually like to listen to TV shows. And it actually astounded me that people don't do this more, where they have to feel, or they feel the need that they have to be watching it. But for me, I actually like just listening to TV shows while I'm working, because then I can have it on my other monitor, but not pay attention to it, but be able to listen to it and pay attention that way. Because even right now, as I'm talking during this live stream, I'm not really focusing on like, okay, how am I gonna add the eyebrow color in? I already know what I'm doing for the most part. I'm already on autopilot. So the things that I can do, like think about my day or what I'm gonna be doing after work, I can be doing things like that. But yeah, I definitely recommend listening to music. And something that I also like to do that I think everyone should do is if you're drawing a character, really try to feel and get into that character's mindset. So oftentimes I'll listen to music that I feel either relates to the character or kind of speaks about the character and who they are.
Puts
And
you in the mood, maybe.
what?
Puts you in the mood, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's definitely something I would recommend at least trying. And if it's not for you, then you don't have to do it. But yeah, I definitely recommend at least trying it once. All right, so for those of you who have been kind of been following what I've been doing, so I've been drawing on top of this initial line art, and what kind of sucks is if you really like your line art, this can be devastating because a lot of the times what you draw and paint over won't be as much to your liking as what you're adding or what it was before. So just know the initial marks you're doing will definitely have an effect because line art separates colors from each other, where if you're coloring on top of it, you're trying to create the illusion of realism, where oftentimes colors bump up right up next against each other, and that creates the illusion of depth, rather than having line art separate it. So even like this area where with the cheek, where the cheek and the neck meet, I really like having that strong line that separates the cheek and the neck. But as I paint over it, that strong line kind of dissipates, and now I have to think about, okay, how can I color this so I can still have that strong visual that I enjoyed, but it won't be so much of a line art as it was before. So I think that's definitely something that throws people off, especially those that are more comfortable with line art. And I think that's why people tend to just give up and they're like, I hate color because all the strong stuff I did with my line work is gone and now I have to like replace it with color. But once you become familiar and comfortable working with color, then it'll become your best friend. I promise you. So just stick at it and just know that yeah, your line art might be super strong, but now you just got to find a way to kind of replace that with your color additions that you're putting onto your face.
When exactly will our portfolio tutorial come out?
What's funny is the moment that I was gonna do it, someone else did a really nice job on it, and I was like, oh man, I really should take the time to make this as nice as I possibly can. You know what? I'm gonna put pressure on myself right now. I'm gonna write it down, Next week. Next week's when you're going to have the portfolio tutorial. I'm going to write it on my whiteboard. Because I'm also wanting to do another course that has been kind of lingering in the back of my head on just how to create buttons from start to finish. For those of you that are interested in going to conventions or just maybe curious about just how buttons are made, and that was an entire course that would be really easy for me to make. So I think that'll be the next one I work on. But then after that, I will do the portfolio one.
Is Photoshop your bread and butter, or do you have any other softwares you like?
Yes, this is definitely my bread and butter. I will say Mischief, which I just tried for the first time a month ago or 2 months ago, that one really surprised me, being such a new software. And I think given time, once the shading becomes more user-friendly, I want to say, I think I would definitely use that for starting off because the line art, it actually has a lazy brush, and that's where your brush lines just become more smooth and it's calculated. So I think that would be my second favorite. But then besides that, yeah, I don't really use like Corel Painter. I don't use other softwares just because I'm so comfortable in Photoshop that starting a new software, while it could learn, I could learn a lot from it. It actually, I don't recommend anyone just sticking with just one. I say try as many as you can. But I tried it and I still feel more comfortable in Photoshop. And this is the one that I'm going to be kind of sticking with. So for the ears, not only do I have to cover them up, but I also have to re-outline them since my line art was so sketchy, it was just giving the impression of an ear. Where here, I'm really trying to make it look like an ear. So I have to color over, have to readjust some things. You can see how using that background color to edge it out really helps pop and separate the subject matter from the background.
For someone that's starting out, how much time do you recommend like practicing every day?
Minimum 2 hours. And I think that intimidates people hearing a number, but in all honesty, it just a lot of time is needed to get better. Because not only are you trying to improve your drawing skills, but you're trying to learn a new software. Like Photoshop is not, uh, I mean, it is user friendly, but there's a lot of different options in Photoshop. And those you'll learn over time. You're not just going to learn those overnight. So I would say the more that you're in the software, you're bound to learn more. So spending about a minimum of 2 hours a day, you'll learn so much more than you would if you're only spending a half hour a day or if you're not doing it every day. The ones that are working in it every day typically are the ones that will progress faster. But saying that, that doesn't mean that you go into Photoshop and repeat the same process you've been doing. Try at least learning or doing one different technique that you didn't do the previous day. And that's how you really begin to learn. Because sometimes when you're doing things repetitiously where you're not really adding anything new to the mix, that will actually hurt you because then you're not learning anything. You're just rehashing what you already know.
What was the other portfolio tutorial you found?
I'd have to find it. It wasn't even a video tutorial. It was a written one, and it had like a 5-step showing like what's the best way to do it. So the way that I'm going to set up the video one is one, kind of explaining to you guys what a portfolio show is like, what you should include in your portfolio, but also really include what employers are looking for. Because a lot of the times we put in our portfolio what we want to kind of showcase as who we are as an artist, but a lot of times you have to cater to the actual employer, especially if you're going on in for a one-on-one interview. You want to make sure that portfolio caters to what they're looking for and what their style may be. So I definitely want it to make it more in-depth than just what makes a good portfolio. I want to make it what will be a strong portfolio and what is the best way to cater your portfolio to a job interview. And I actually think I'm going to leave some of these line art marks. I kind of like the way they look, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
These are like some of those happy accidents that every artist always talks about having when they don't go in with like an initial set solid plan on what they're going to be creating.
Have you ever used Sketchbook Pro?
Yes, actually, I really do like Sketchbook Pro, and there's a downloadable version for the phone, and that one I use on my Android, and that I really like. And if you're not digging Photoshop because of the price, what I do is I'm on a monthly plan for the Adobe suite, and you can kind of pick which softwares you want. But I pay about $20 a month for Photoshop. So for me, that's viable, but maybe for you that might just be too much, and like you don't have that extra expense where this might even be more of a hobby. Then I would try GIMP or one of the other softwares that are either free to use or even just try out the free trials. Almost every software I've ever come across that's a 2D digital painting software has a 30-day free trial that you can go ahead and try out. I'm really starting to like how this is looking.
What's a good balance of hours spent drawing solo to watching toots and tutorials and following along?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
While I was in school, I didn't have internet at my dorm, so I literally had no other option than to just draw the entire time. But when I was in school, I would say I would like to watch the tutorials while I'm drawing. So, and maybe this doesn't relate to you where you're one of those people that have to watch every step of the progress of the tutorial, but a lot of the times the tutorials I find the most useful are the ones that you don't have to draw or you don't have to follow. Oftentimes you just listen and you try to pick up on what they're trying to say to you. Like the Feng Zhu tutorial I talked about earlier. I learned so much from that tutorial, and obviously there was no follow along that I had to do. There was no worksheet that was associated with it. It was just one of those things where if you really listen to what they're saying, those are the tutorials that are worth watching. I often think more than the visual ones sometimes, unless if you're a visual learner, because I often felt like I could just watch a tutorial and there didn't even have to be audio or like the instructor didn't even have to speak. And I could just see the process on how he was doing it, and I would learn that way. But I mean, you know yourself better than anyone. So think about like how much time are you spending on drawing? Is this helping you? Do you find the tutorials you're watching, do those actually help you, or do you just like watching them and to say that you watched them? And you can be like, oh, well, I should be better. I watched this tutorial. I mean, you really have to let it sink in and have it. Uh, what's that word? Where it actually reaches you and you understand it, rather than just watching it but not actually applying what they're trying to teach.
Sarah asks, I decided to make art my job, focusing on concept art, and I was wondering if it's a good idea to apply for a university or college, or if it's better to just take like a few classes here and there to develop her art.
Um, I guess personally, I wouldn't go to a university or any private education teaching art. There are so many valuable art sources online, and Deandra could even speak on this too, where you don't need to go to a school. But I will say the one thing that school does give you is an environment where a lot of the same-minded people are around you. And honestly, some of my best friends that I made are the ones that I made during college, and a lot of those are ones that we make connections with each other. So those friendships also became beneficial because then like if a job opening opened at a company that one of our friends worked at, then he or she could be like, "Hey, there's an opening, you guys should apply. I'll put in a good word for you." So a lot of the times, not only are you just making friends that you could have for the rest of your life, but you're also making connections. And what's the word that Pui always says? Um, oh
Uh,
man,
I don't know.
where he talks about people being outlets of to help you along the way as you can help them. So that's the one thing universities give you that I don't think
Community.
online education gives you nearly as much. What?
Like a community, a good sense
Yeah.
of community instead of just like being all alone.
Studying in your room, because that can be actually really depressing. I think having someone to compete against, healthy competition, I think that's the best way for you to grow because then you're trying to compete with someone, and so it doesn't become so much about yourself, and then it gives you a reason to try to get better. Because sometimes if you're doing it just for yourself, there will be moments where you're just like, I don't even want to do it today, and like, oh, I'm not feeling good about my work, and I don't think I'm good enough. And a lot of those ideas will kind of sink in, and they'll stay there. But having someone to constantly push you, I think, gives you that extra little kick or motivation that's needed to sometimes get over those mental hurdles.
What classes do you recommend taking?
Oh man. Okay. CGMA has really great classes by there's like three artists I love. Tyson Murphy is one of them. Well, I'm a little biased because I think color and light is so crucial in learning digital art, and the classes that I would want to take are the color and light ones. So those are taught by Tyson Murphy and Ryan Lang, and those are two artists that I adore, and I think they are fantastic. But if you're looking for more fundamental stuff, I would say color and light is very advanced, where if you're still trying to figure out like how do I draw in Photoshop correctly, like that might been doing
Digital
a
one or something.
yeah, something that's more introductory might be
Or even
better.
just like figure drawing, really.
Oh, actually, yeah, figure drawing. You know what? If you do go to a university, take a figure drawing class. I learned more in that class than any of my other classes and in that entire time I was there. Okay, I'm gonna lighten up the pupils here. So now I'm trying to actually give some shaping to the pupils where the line art was so sketchy that the eyeballs themselves looked a bit too flat, where now I'm going to try to make them look more dimensional here.
Do you have any good tips for developing a good drawing style? I'm sort of sifting in between a strange hybrid of anime and semi-realistic for my drawings, but I'm never really satisfied. I don't know which one suits me better.
God, I feel like I can't relate any more to that. I I always just tell myself don't feel like you have to lock yourself down into one style because oftentimes that will frustrate you to no end, and especially if you're kind of similar to me where it actually becomes like a thing where you have to be like, okay, there's one style that I'm going to do. I'm going to pick it. I'm going to stick with that throughout my entire career. I think that has so much pressure on it that it actually will hurt you. So if you just stick to be like, you know what, today I'm going to be drawing this chibi thing and it's not really following my realism style, but I really want to draw a chibi something, then go ahead and draw that chibi thing, even if it's dumb and it doesn't relate or look like any of your other work. Because over time, even when you draw chibi stuff, your little techniques and your little color add-ons or your little whatever tidbits that you add will still carry your characteristics of how you normally draw a piece, even if it's not in the same style or the same like a realism versus a chibi, obviously. There will be things that carry over between the two because of who you are and what how you go about drawing the piece. So I guess my answer is that is try not to put too much pressure on it. Let it develop on its own and never feel like you have to limit yourself because you have to feel you have to cater to your own particular style. Yeah, I just saw on the side someone said, "Weren't you supposed to flip the image more?"
Yeah.
Yep. I know sometimes when I'm talking during these live streams, I'm so on autopilot that I forget what I'm doing um, on the actual image itself.
Sometimes like the asymmetry like that you can kind of see right now makes it more realistic because like human like if you're trying to go for realistic like we don't have like perfect faces or not like most of us don't.
Hmm.
So even though like you want to make sure the proportions are right, like it's okay if it's like not like you like it's not like perfect or perfectly symmetrical.
Yeah, and definitely when I flip it, I just want to make sure the image doesn't look like it's melting toward one direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
This eye looks like I should probably even like push this entire area a little closer to the head.
Yeah.
But
Just
yeah, I think when people get too OCD with making sure everything's like symmetrical from one side to the other side, it actually hurts their image. And having things like maybe the eyebrow is cut a little different on one side than the other side, that actually adds some more personality to the character too.
Do you know anything about advertising or any great tutorials about it? For example, doing logos in corporation design.
Oh man. Um, I guess I had to do everything for each sheet from our marketing to our, yeah, for our logos, our icons, everything. And it's completely different. You definitely have to be in a different mindset. And actually, I did it even for a freelance game while I was in school, Rig Fire. And it is different in the sense that you have to really create polished looking, almost vector looking quality outputs. So I would almost recommend if you're doing stuff that's more graphic designy, you should be doing more research probably in like Illustrator, where you're not working so much with uh, like pixels where I'm kind of just painting things like this, where you can work on making things that are perfectly aligned. They're perfectly, there's no jaggy edges at all. It can be very, very well produced. But I think something like Adobe Illustrator would be better for that kind of stuff. But for tutorials, you can definitely find those online too. And I would say YouTube has kind of been my best friend for finding tutorials on subject matters. So I would just give that a look.
How do you get rid of art block?
Slowly and painfully. Oftentimes, you need to walk away from what you're doing, do a new piece, something where you need to be in a different mindset. Because sometimes when you attack a piece with the same mindset, if you're in a negative position or if you're not feeling good about your work in general, it's probably not the best to continue forcing something onto your work where your energy is really bad. And I know that sounds really like what is that? Like yin and yang, making sure everything's in balance. But a lot of the times, your energy will translate into your pieces. And that sounds kind of crazy, but oftentimes when I'm in a good mood and things are just working right or I'm feeling inspired, oftentimes my pieces will just turn out better. And that's not just me, giving you guys a bush. I'm really being serious about oftentimes when you're in a better mood or you're feeling good about your work will represent and reflect that.
Do you still make traditional paintings slash drawings, or are you committed to digital art?
Nope. I still have my sketchbook, and I try to draw on it at least once a week. I for a while I was doing once a night, where every night before I went to bed I would draw a sketch, but a bit too much. So I try to at least do once a week where I'll do a drawing in my sketchbook because I feel it's really important just to sometimes strip away digital media and just draw traditionally and be able to look at something, analyze it from a traditional sense. And then hopefully the goal of that is to have that translate into your digital skills and vice versa. We're almost there helping each other then. Okay, I'm going to actually give this guy pupils.
Ethan says, I have a huge problem with getting impatient while drawing. Any tips for relaxing and getting comfortable with spending a long time at the drawing board?
Yeah, music I would say helps. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm quite the opposite, where I actually find drawing to be the most relaxing thing I could possibly think of to do. So if you're getting frustrated in drawing, I would say you're probably trying to push something, like either you're trying to work values or you're trying to do something that's not comfortable for you. So maybe just take your time and learn how to do it accurately and then go back to the drawing and see if you can work it after you've kind of practiced it a bit.
I kind of have the same problem. I get like really impatient fast. But yeah, I would say music helps a lot. Or like just something going on in the background, like a TV show. It it helps. And
Hmm.
then like if you're really struggling with like one part of it, sometimes I'll take a break from that specific painting or drawing and then like play with a different one.
I think that's the
And
best thing to do is
then
where,
come back later like with a fresh, mindset.
hmm, yeah, absolutely. Okay, I guess with this head, since we're kind of nearing the end of the live stream itself, what I would probably do at this point, I'm just going to do it really quick, is I'm going to merge all those layers together. I'm going to pull up my liquify. And then this is where I'll get into autopilot of just being like, okay, I see where the problems are, I need to fix them. Oh, and you guys probably can't see my liquify edits, but you'll see it in just a second. So you can see the slide there. I'll flip it,
Mm-hmm.
see what it looks like from that side. And it's just like a lot of little editing. And then here's where then you can really start getting into your personal little tips and tricks. Like I usually will create a duplicate of the layer, set it to multiply, turn the opacity down a little bit, grab an eraser tool. And like these are all things that I've just done over time that I've kind of learned and picked up and things that have worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
Then you'll find yours, I promise. If the more you do it, you'll find yours eventually. So then that's one thing I do. And then the next thing, I usually like to pull like a light blue. I'm going to actually grab a different brush. Let's grab a skin brush. And I like to pull, and mind you, just like my overlay and multiply layers, I like laying it in thicker and then lowering the opacity on the actual layer. And this is something that I've noticed recently that I really like, is pulling blues into your shadows. And oftentimes it works best if you have like a warm light hitting for your light colors. So usually this will represent that they're outside. And shadows, and this is something that is really obvious to see when the sun is kind of almost setting and the trees are casting shadows, everything, the houses you're around cast shadows. The color of the shadow itself should be a blue tint, and that's because it's reflecting the sky. So oftentimes, or not even oftentimes, this is something that I've recently started doing more, is I'll pull blue into my shadow areas and then turn the layers opacity down. And I really like that the look that gives it, because then my shadows aren't as intense. Then I'm getting some more value or hue contrast rather than it just being a pure value contrast. So let me turn that layer's opacity down. And you can see when I turn that layer on and off, it's a very subtle addition, but it really does add a nice little touch to it, or at least I think it does. And it's something that I try to do, and I'm telling you, you'll learn these little tips and tricks as you go. I hope I never get to a point where I feel like I've learned all my tips and tricks that I'm going to do on my pieces. That's why sometimes I think really being like, no, I have a personal style I need to attend to. I need to make sure they all look the exact same. I think you need to throw that notion completely out the window because that will hurt you in the long run. Because you will develop it on your own without you even noticing it. And I think if you try to force it, that's when you're really hurting yourself. Let me go in and just add some highlights here and there so I can kind of finish this one out. And since this was more of a practice piece, I don't have to like get into detailing like crazy. I don't need to zoom in. And that's actually something I do want you guys to realize is the entire time I've been working on this, I haven't zoomed in once. Because the more that I do painting, the more I realize if you zoom in, you're wasting time on something that's going to be seen when you're zoomed out. So try your very best to stay as zoomed out as much as possible for as long as possible. And only zoom in. Like I guess this would be a good example where the reflection on the eye, if I wanted to create something that looked really badass, I'm going to zoom in, make it a little smaller. And you can definitely see how rough it looks when it's close up. And then maybe like some reflection on that exposed muscle in the corner of the eye. Then right where that eye meets the skin. And then maybe just a little bit on the nose, just a tad. I have a problem with making noses look a little plastic, so I'm going to try to resist not putting too much white on that nose. So yeah, so then something like this just adds that touch of realism, and especially adding the little shines on the eye, because that definitely gives it a different texture and material surface, where it gives the impression that it has more of a wet or a glossy appearance. Where the skin, I'm trying to keep it more toned down. Now, even for the skin, I would probably go throughout and make it quite a bit less intense. Where I think right now the values are a bit too much, where it's actually not what I was intending to create. So I'd probably soften it up in different areas. But for the most part, I would be happy with this one. The lips definitely need more work. But I wanted to focus on the eye and the nose area and give the overall impression of the look. So you can see what that looks like before and after. And as always, as you add in, oh, sorry, you go.
All right. What's the size of your screen? Henrique asks.
My screen. So
Yes.
my screen is a 2048, I believe, but my actual canvas size, let me check. And I always work at a 300 resolution. You never know when you're going to need something print ready. And even for practice pieces, you'll surprise yourself. Maybe you create something that's a masterpiece, and if you create it on a 72 resolution, it'll be really tough to print it unless if you're working at like a 30 by 30 inch size. So like right now, this is only an 8, slightly less than 8 by 8 at a 300 resolution. Okay, then I think I'm going to cut this one off here, and then before I cut it off though, because that was a mistake we did last time, is there any other questions you guys want to ask? And I'll kind of just start announcing what is coming up on Concept Cookie. And the biggest thing is tomorrow we have the tutorial from McLean Kendry, and this was definitely one of those that I watched all the way through, and I watched it twice because I thought it was so good, and there were different things about it that I learned, and it is on creating the Pug Warrior. And it's a cute little design, but the way that he attacks it and treats it is very serious, and he really is a professional when it comes to creating images, even if the outcome is something as silly as a pug warrior. And maybe I'll also give a little more attention to these lips while we're ending this off here.
I think we got through all of them for the most
Got them
part.
all?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Okay, well then I'm going to go ahead and cut this one off here. These were kind of just simple tips and tricks to start drawing the face. I definitely think you'll find your own path as you continue doing it, but I promise you, you have to practice if you want to get better. And that's the best advice you can ever get is don't stop talking and start doing. So I want to thank you guys for coming to this live stream. I really hope you guys maybe picked up on something while you were watching. We do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m., and that's Central Time in the States, and that's -5 GMT outside of the States. And usually the topic will be posted about an hour, sometimes longer, on what we will be doing. And I will put a link to it from there. And that's on our DeviantArt, our Twitter, our Tumblr, our Facebook. Any one of those will give you the right link to the actual stream itself. And, oh, I saw. And I know you guys, some of you have been asking if we can ever switch back to Twitch just because the questions and the conversation is a lot easier to follow. And I'm really hoping Google Hangouts will just kind of fix that itself. But for now, we kind of have to cater to what we're given. So if you guys have any other questions, you can either send them to me in a personal message on Facebook or on or at my email. But for the most part, I think we're going to cut this one off here. And I keep seeing like little pop-ups in the corner from the comments. Really quick, someone said, any tips about drawing hair?
Yeah.
Clump them together. Think of it as drawing them in different shapes. Like even up here, I don't know if you guys can see this because the hair is so dark, but like I see a shape here. This could be a shape. Obviously, I wouldn't just square it off like that, but that's kind of the general representation that's going on in my head. So I would probably clump the hair together in those different shapes and then shade it accordingly. So then I would probably have, let's say, the square section then, for instance. And then I would kind of pillow shade it from the middle out. So the middle would be catching most of that reflection, like that. And then it would just kind of pillow out until the edges. And then there would be like a pretty deep shine going down the center, depending on the light source and so many different factors. But let's just say, for example, this was our shine and something like that. So a lot of times, don't overkill it. Don't feel like you have to draw every individual strand, because then otherwise you'd be killing yourself with time. And yeah, okay, so now are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, well thank you guys for coming. Hopefully we'll see you next week, and stay tuned for the tutorial tomorrow, and I will get that portfolio tutorial at least prepped by next week along with the button course. So thank you guys for watching. I'm Tim and Deandra. You want to say bye?
Goodbye.
All right, see you guys later.